job, which was good. I used it to work on making comics. It was always nice. How were your
Yeah,
holidays?
yeah, sick. I spent it reading comics, so you put out, I
Yeah.
consume, I guess.
Yeah, I read some comics too. That's always nice when you can do that. It's a nice way to
Yeah.
spend holidays.
Anything good, or that you'd
So
recommend?
Titan is releasing these Blade Runner comics, Blade Runner 2029. I love
I
sci.
heard about those.
So it's co-written by the person who co-wrote the Blade Runner sequel.
Hmm.
He actually had involvement with the movie, and this is the second series. And so these are books that actually take place in the Blade Runner universe. They're canon, and I love cyberpunk and I love Blade Runner. And we have a writer who is familiar with the universe and has worked directly firsthand with the material. So I've been reading those. I've also been reading the Cyberpunk 2077 comic adaptations.
Yes. Have you
Uh,
heard
uh,
about any of the turmoils involving the actual game itself that's been currently
yeah,
going on? Or
yeah. They had to give a lot of refunds for previous generation
mm,
consoles. That's the kind of thing that's difficult. It, it's a game that had a lot of investors and set a release date before everything was worked out. I
yeah,
think
so
long term, it's all going to work out. They're going to send patches and everything's going to end up working and the game itself will be fine. So it's a turbulent launch, but it was also a profitable launch. There's some bad press coming from the fact that it didn't launch smoothly. I think that's just the way of modern video games now, is that they launch imperfect, incomplete games with the idea that you patch them up as you go.
well, especially during like these. I mean, I've been a gamer long enough, pretty much all my life since like all my life. I'm not going to date myself here, but so it also seems to be, it's a tricky road whenever there are these generational gaps between
Right.
systems, right? Where
Correct.
you're obviously trying to target the new systems that come out while still supporting the, I guess at this point, all gen that everybody still has. So,
Right. I think some of it, the problem is a lack of transparency. So it
yeah,
reminds me of No Man's Sky, and there were complaints about that only because what was promised was not what was delivered. And if they had actually said, listen, we're going to launch a more modest version of the game, and as time goes on it's going to become grander and more epic in scope and more
yeah.
ambitious, then people would say, I get it, this is a good preliminary game and it's building. Instead, what happened was they were promised one set of things, their expectation levels were different from the game they received, and that's what created cognitive dissonance. I think
Absolutely agree.
happens with something like Cyberpunk 2077, where if you just say, listen, it's going to look great on a set of consoles,
Right.
and it's going to struggle with the previous set of consoles. So don't run out, buy it at launch. If you have a previous generation console, it's going to take time for it to work. Or if you do buy it, understand that it's going to be limited in what you can do with it right now. And we're working on getting it up to speed, but our priorities were on the current generation console.
Right.
So you're right. Whenever there are changes, whenever there's a shift in generational consoles, there is difficulty in it. But I also think transparency, if you just tell people what's going to happen and what to expect,
Yeah.
this firestorm of outrage that, so.
And I think that's a problem that both games clearly face. And I have a feeling that you're right that a year from now, Cyberpunk will be the current version of No Man's Sky.
Right. Yeah.
Where it launched really rocky and unfinished, and look at the game now. So,
Look, I mean, what's promising about it is the people who play it on the current generation of consoles say it looks amazing.
yeah,
It's clear that A, they've had a lot of really talented people who B, put a lot of time, effort, and love into making a cool game. And really, those are the things. Look, we all know about vaporware and a lot of people who just throw garbage out there with the intention of making a quick buck. And
right.
that's, well, nobody enjoys any of that. Now, if you have the opposite problem where something is too ambitious and they're trying to do something big and epic, and it's not quite there, then the opportunity of time and patching and fixing it up are going to work in its favor. Um, I understand why people would prefer to put out the hype that this is going to be a great game at the start, to build up the sense of expectations and
Yeah.
anticipation and the hype. I think it's self-defeating in some ways. Having said that, it looks like CD Projekt Red made a lot of money, so they're laughing their way to the bank. I always feel bad for all the programmers and coders, who work through
Of
crunch.
course.
Um, that's always unfortunate, and I think all these AAA games that set these unrealistic deadlines are going to run into that kind of thing. The short answer to your question was I've been reading Blade Runner comics and I was reading the Cyberpunk comics, and those were the ones that I'm looking at, trying to figure out whether I can do my own kind of cyberpunk thing. And yeah, we'll see.
Well, speaking of that, let me just, for those who are watching and might not know, let me just quickly introduce you.
All right, sure.
So this is my good friend and pal, Roel Torres. If you've been admiring the artwork, the banner, the logos that we have on this channel, you have this amazing, kind artist to thank, good friend of mine. And yeah, so why don't you, who are you for those who might not know?
Sure. So I came to this country. My mom was classified as an illegal alien in 1981. She grew up in the Philippines, and when I was born, the Philippines had a dictator for life who had imposed martial law and suspended free elections, and had put death threats out against our family. So my mom left in 1981. We came to this country, and I've been interested when I was growing up in the Philippines. Comic books were a rare commodity. Not only did we not have local comic book stores, which was a later development in the 80s, but we didn't even really have these superhero comics available at newsstands or convenience stores, because what happens is that if you print up these comics in the United States and they're made by American publishers, in order for printed matter to get to islands in the Philippines, they would arrive by boat. And so they would import them, and the taxes on them, they were very expensive. They were rare materials. Comics.
So it's very cost prohibitive, obviously, to do that.
It was. I would see them occasionally, but when I was growing up, I'm 48. I was born in 72, and in the United States, when I was growing, like when I finally came to the country in 81, comics were available for about 60 cents a comic, whereas in the Philippines they were going for about $7 a comic, just because of the markup. They were just rare commodities. Right. And the reason comic books could be cheap earlier and in their infancy was that they were printed on newsprint, so they were cheap. The problem with that, right, is that you're not going to get a lot of newsprint transport over. You're not going to get a lot of cheap goods that were shipped over to the Philippines. That's usually not what they put on these great cargo boats and they take across the world, is cheap material. That's not exactly a profitable business model. So right. I was growing up in the Philippines, I love seeing these American comic books with these superheroes. And
did you have a favorite, or were they so rare that it was hard to really?
Well, what would happen was sometimes I would get my hands on these reprint comics, and some of the reprint comics had a Marvel Western character named Kid Colt.
Okay, yes, I am familiar.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of Kid Colt comics. I thought, wow, this guy's cool. And, my second favorite was the DC Speedster Flash. So
okay.
I always thought he had the coolest costume. I thought it was very sleek. It also helped that they didn't draw him as a typical muscular super. He was sleek. He was sleek and he looked like a sprinter. And so I enjoyed the Flash, and those were my favorite heroes. When I came to this country, and I had the benefit of going to dedicated local comic book stores, and the two comic book stores that have sustained me through my life have both won Eisner Awards for being best comic book store on the planet.
Wow.
I moved to Worcester, and Worcester, when I was growing up, when I was in lower school, middle school, high school, I went to a comic book store called That's Entertainment, which won Eisner. And then where I've met you and what we're both familiar with, our local comic book shop,
yes.
Kamikaze, is the proud winner of, I think it was the 2017 Eisner Award for Best Comic Book Shop on the planet. They won it very recently.
Yeah,
So
I feel like they, and for good
yeah,
reason. But I feel like they every
absolutely.
year they keep on winning it. But
So
again, I mean, they're a great shop, so they definitely deserve it. But yeah,
yeah, it's a fantastic shop. I love it. They're very supportive of the local comic book community. They've been very supportive of local comic book creators. Excellent stuff. So anyhow, when I came to the States, I had this availability of comic books. And in the 80s, there was an indie explosion and First Comics came
mm,
out. And one of the first the titles that came from First Comics was called John Sable Freelance by Mike Grell. And I love
okay,
that. I've got some original Mike Grell art directly sent.
wow,
I mean, so this is a commission I got myself for the holidays. I did some retail therapy in 2020. 2020 was a difficult year, so I bought myself presents, and one of the presents I got myself was I commissioned original art from Mike Grell,
that's
who
amazing.
did Warlord for DC. He did Legion of Superheroes for DC, and he
And he
did
did
an
some stuff for Marvel too, right? Like he
yeah.
was a big
I
name
think
back in
Mike
the day.
yeah Mike Grell yeah he did Longbow Hunters. That was a big
Yeah,
prestige format
yeah.
title. But so I enjoyed very much John Sable freelance and and so now what I do more than following specific characters is I like specific creators, specific
Okay.
writers, specific artists, and that's who I follow. But yeah, my comic book interests started when I was a kid growing up in the Philippines. Then I moved to the States in 1981 and I found some great local comic book stores. And because of those interests, I decided to make my own. And for years I've been writing and doing the art for my own comics.
Anything that you'd like to plug?
Sure. So let me reach behind me and
All right.
examples of these books. Here are the two most recent ones. This is called Border X, A Crisis in Graphic Detail. So I contributed to this. I think, I also helped with the editorial work.
Okay.
Proceeds of this book go to the South Texas Human Rights Center,
Mm.
which helps immigrants by the border. So this is a book about the crisis of immigrants at the southern U.S. border.
I was
And
gonna say that I was originally gonna say that I love the artwork of the cover, but now that I know what it's about, I feel a
yeah,
little
well,
bad
so
about that. Like, should I
no,
love the
but it's all right.
artwork?
So it's we love the artwork on the cover because it's a great image
Mm.
and it's a good job of describing this situation. So it's okay to love this cover. It's okay to love the book. And it treats a very serious topic in a variety of ways. There are some stories in there that, of course, are very heartbreaking, but there are also some stories that are humorous and they're very personal. My story in there is very personal. So that's true. And
So if people
it was
wanted
a
to read your story, sorry,
yes.
they could. It's in that book along with a bunch of others.
Yes, correct. And it's available on Amazon, and it was number one on Amazon for the anthologies.
Wow.
Amazon number one on their top 10 list, top 30 list, top 30 hot list, whatever. And so,
Congrats.
yeah, and
That's
as we
very
said,
exciting.
it's fantastic. It's so great. And as we say, all the money goes to the South Texas Human Rights Center, so it's even better. And that's all going to a good cause. We've raised thousands of dollars for it. So, Border X, again, I would recommend just go on Amazon, readily available. You can buy it electronic Kindle version, or you can buy the hard copy. And then a work that I did that's a little less serious in tone. This is called Death Face Rocket Crew, and
Okay.
this
And
original
again,
graphic
loving the
novel.
artwork. Very almost Terminator meets Judge Dredd kind of vibe going on there.
Well, it's interesting to say Judge Dredd because the person who colored this cover, so I did the line art for it. The person who colored it is a contributor to Judge Dredd. He's done Judge
Oh,
art. So yeah,
so there you go.
Stephen Denton is the cover colorist on this, and he does great work. And
I mean,
he's
it was
done
kind of the mood that was giving me that Judge Dredd vibe. So that makes perfect
well,
sense
right.
knowing that.
So
So,
yeah, Stephen Denton does fantastic Judge Dredd work, and Judge Dredd is another favorite character of mine, and I love him, and he's another big influence. So Death Face Rocket Crew is a 170-page graphic novel where I wrote, did the art, did the letters, and did the colors for it. I had flatters help me with the color, so I'm very thankful for both of them, both my flatters. And it was successfully funded on Kickstarter, and now it's also available on Amazon. If you look for Death Face Rocket Crew on Amazon, it's printed under my favorite label, Bad Kids Press, and also included in the back. I do a lot of back matter where I try to share my process and how I work. So it has sketches, then has process work that shows what happens when I take photo reference and do the sketches and then do the inks and do the colors. So
that's fantastic.
I
always love it when artists or writers kind of share, the behind the scenes, the breakdowns, kind of how did they get to that finished process
right
stuff.
So me too. So like when I was a kid, I read a book called Concrete Killer Smile by Paul Chadwick, and he put his process work in the back, and that was very inspirational to me. It was the first time where I understood how this one individual was making comics, but even more specifically how a very well-respected, very talented artist like Paul Chadwick was using photo reference to help him make comics, and reference made his life more simple, and he showed how it happened. And so I do similar things where I take pictures of my action figures. Here is a picture of RoboCop on a bicycle, and then I sketch it, ink it, and then...
Is that from the, what was it, the 2014 movie or something?
Yeah, so that's the modern adaptation of RoboCop, because the modern RoboCop looks much more like my lead character, so I bought an action figure of the modern RoboCop because of the resemblance.
Yeah, no, I was just asking, because great design...
Yeah. Disposable movie.
Yeah.
Right. And on the left is a picture of action figures in front of my amplifier and guitar pedals. And then again, I just sort of turn that into futuristic machines and futuristic and so Death Face Rocket Crew, my graphic novel, 170 pages, available on Amazon. I wrote the art, did the letters and the colors on it. And yeah, so those are two things that I would plug if people want to check them out. The third thing to plug is that I think Bad Kids Press is going to get Diamond catalog distribution in 2021.
Oh, that's big news. You heard it here first.
Yes, that's correct. It's big news. You heard it here first. We were actually going to get it in 2020, but then a global pandemic hit. And
funny how global pandemics have a way of kind of halting any plans you might have.
So the global pandemic caused lots of plans, but not only that, the comic book industry. The global pandemic really hurt the comic book industry because it's a retail-oriented business where it depends on a lot of walk-in business and people walking into your store. And so that changed, but also distribution was hurt. DC Comics opted out of
they did.
Using Diamond catalog distribution. And so
we've been talking about that actually a lot in our news podcast. So
there are a lot of ramifications. One, that for retailers who I have a lot of sympathy for, retailers had a difficulty, right? Because they used to get all their books from one source. And when it separated...
And now that's changed, and also the days that they're supposed to stack the new comics have changed depending upon the publisher. It's all...
So it created uncertainty and it created chaos for the retailers. So that was bad. One benefit for it, for independent comics, is now DC used to take up like 40 pages in the Diamond catalog. And those pages are now empty because DC doesn't take them up. So if you're an indie creator, we were probably going to get Diamond catalog distribution in 2020. We were in the process, things got paused. Now it looks even more manageable because DC is not a part of Diamond.
So they have these pages that you need to fill.
They have pages that they need to fill. And so as independent creators, we have 4 titles that are ready to go. Most of the art, writing, coloring, lettering has been done on 3-4 issues of 4 different titles. So one of the titles, I'm wearing a shirt that says Frank and the Jailbait Punks. And so Frackin' Rockin' and Jailbait Punks will be a title that I wrote, and I got a Polish illustrator named Łukasz Kowalczyk, and he did the artwork on it. And so that's a 4-issue mini. The first 3 are complete, and we've started work on the 4th.
And that's the other great thing, though. Like, by DC leaving,
Yes.
Diamond Publishing, which, by the way, is a huge, for those who might not know, pretty much America's biggest comic book distributor. They put out.
It was essentially a monopoly for many
Yeah,
years.
they send catalogs of everything to. That's pretty much what comic book shops use to
Correct.
advance pre-order, right?
That's
So
right.
when DC left, on their part, they had all these pages that they needed to fill. But also, I feel like it's very exciting because, uh, like you were saying, these independent creators who might not have quite the income as, say, a DC Comics,
Right.
who could use the exposure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great for everyone.
It is. It's great for everyone except for, the retailers who had to deal with the
Sure.
fall.
Yes.
But once you deal with it and you adapt, I think that there's opportunities there. And I think in the end, it's probably going to be detrimental to DC. They don't
Mm.
need me to tell them how to run their business. They're a billion-dollar enterprise, with a lot of corporate money behind them. But I think if everyone goes to one place to get their comics and you're
Yeah, it's
not in
easier.
that place, that's not ideal. But having said that, it's good for Bad Kids Press. It's good for us. We have 4 titles coming out: Frankenrocker and the Jailbait Punks, Stealing Oz, which I've helped write / edit with Jeff Munson and Stephen Coughlin. Stephen
Nice.
doing the art. Jeff is writing it. The 3rd title is Lumen by Tony McMillan, and all the issues of that are complete. And the 4th title is called Cheap Tricks, which is a Western written and drawn by Stephen Coughlin, and I'm doing the lettering on that. So,
A
4 titles.
lot of stuff coming out. 2021 is going to be
Yes.
big.
Well, you know what? In one way, the global pandemic was helpful in that it gave us more lead time and opportunity to work on our projects before we launched. So we were going to launch in 2020, and we were sort of prepared. Now we're very, very prepared. Like, for Tony McMillan, Lumen, all 4 issues are written and done. They're finished. They're complete.
Wow.
So by the time he solicits orders for them,
They'll be
everybody.
ready to go.
Right. And the other 3 books, they all have 3 full issues, and people are working on the 4th, So
Yeah.
we're happy with where we are.
That's
And, fingers crossed that it's a good launch and that we're not looking to get rich from it. We're not looking to make a lot of profit from it. We just want people to get their hands on our book. We want to put our books in people's hands, which is hard without distribution. Like, it's been this learning process. When you first get interested in comics, what you want to do is make them.
Yes.
It's
I think that's something that everyone, I certainly did.
Yeah.
Everyone does who's into the hobby.
Right. And so you make them and they're made and you're happy because you've put this effort into it. And then you realize a lot of that effort really is not amortized unless people can read it, unless
Right.
you contribute it, unless
Kind of
people.
just sits on your own shelf somewhere.
Right.
With
It's
drawings that you did in high school, but hey.
Yeah. And what's hard about all of that is making comics is fun, to a large extent. Just distributing comics really isn't that much fun. It's work, and it's dry, it's bureaucratic, it's red tape, it's administrative. Nobody says I want to grow up and distribute comics. That's not the enjoyable creative part of it. Having said that, it's a critical necessary part, and that's part of the evolution, the development as comic book creators. The second step where you realize I want to get my books out there, and I want people to be able to get their hands on them, and I want them to be able to read them. I want to be able to share my work with everyone.
Right.
So that was a transition, and there are barriers. There are gates that prevent easy distribution. Some of which are getting into the Diamond catalog, which all the shops would look at. And then second is there's some financial aspects involved, because if you do want to sell your comics in all the comics shops around the country and you want it to be in the catalog, it takes a lot of upfront money to print copies, because you don't get paid until after all the books are sold. And so you don't have that money initially to pay for printing runs.
Right.
So if you have 4 titles and you have to do print runs of each title, and let's say you print 1,000 copies of each title, just for easy math. So that's 4,000 books that you're printing up. If it costs you $2 each to print them, that's $8,000 that you need saved up just to print up the books, the hopes of selling them.
Right, not to mention then shipping them and everything else.
Yeah. All of it. And do you want to pay for advertising? Do you want to pay for creator costs? Are you going to pay people to help you with promotion? All of that's secondary. Just to print.
Right.
If you've got 4 titles, you're printing 1,000 titles each, that's 4,000 books. If it costs you $2 to print each of them, that's $8,000. And if you don't have that, you can't print up the books.
Right.
That's a different distribution model than print on demand. If you have a book that you've created and then you just list it on a site as print on demand, you don't need to print copies up front. Whenever someone orders a book, the printer prints and sends it to them. And there's no upfront cash, and there's no stock. You don't have a bunch of books sitting in
your living room.
Yeah.
Nice.
All of that means it's great to create comics. Distributing is another level of investment. I mean, on different levels, it's an investment of time and effort, and there's also a financial investment if you want distribution. So my point was that none of us are looking to get rich from Diamond Catalog and distributing these books. We're hoping we break even. We are prepared to take a little bit of a loss on it. Like we're fully prepared, realistic enough to realize that we're probably not going to make money off these books, but we want people to read them. And that's what happens sometimes, is that you have to invest money to build, to get your books out there. And then hopefully people like them, and it gives us an opportunity to make more comics and put more books out.
Well, that all sounds great and very promising. So let me quickly ask you.
Yes.
You've already mentioned Bad Kids Press a couple times.
I have.
What is Bad Kids Press?
Sure. So it's a collective of local comic book artists in the Boston/Somerville area. It has an open door policy where folks who like making comics can gather. When I first started making comics, it was a very isolated experience. It was just me at home by myself making comics. And while I enjoyed the creativity of it, that kind of isolation, it can be exhausting. And what Bad Kids Press did was that they brought all these creators together in the same place, in the same room, and you develop a collaborative spirit. You also develop momentum and energy when you realize other people are interested in the same thing you are, and have the same passion for this. But for creating comic books sort of makes you this isolated weirdo, because you're spending all the time and effort on things that aren't going to make any money and no one's ever going to see. That's not a great concept for a hobby, but if you love it and it's what you do, you can't help yourself.
Sure.
When you surround yourself with other like-minded people, these other isolated weirdos who are spending all their time and effort on books that will not make money and no one will ever see, then you realize it's not such a weird thing, and that you're not alone. And so other people get together, other people gather, other people tell you their ideas. Here's a story I have. Here's something I'm working on. Here are the pages I have. Here's what I've written. Here's what I've drawn. And then you also go, you guys want to work together. So now this one writer wants to work with this artist, and this artist wants to work with this colorist wants to work with this letterer, and everyone's exchanging ideas. And the process gets easier and more fun. And I don't know if people might not know this, but that's also how I met our host, Evan. So
hi, yes, I was It's been a while. Again,
Yeah,
pandemics
sure.
will do that. But yes,
That's right.
obviously, still am, I guess, a member.
Correct.
I've
And
also
yeah,
moved further away, so it's been a while. But I'm looking to get
still,
back into meetings and stuff. So
meetings are good, but virtual communication is good. But also,
yeah,
once you meet someone and shake their hand, um, even though you and I haven't met in a while, we still interact. We still
absolutely.
exchange communication, and I still do work for you, and we can still continue that process because once you bring people into the room and they meet each other, the collaborative
Then
aspect.
that's it. They've already met. Yeah.
You've already met, you already know who the people are, you get along, you know who's talented, you know who is dependable and reliable, you know who's productive. And that's a great foundation for building a creative relationship. And so, Evan came to Bad Kids Press meetings and he had ideas, and I was in Bad Kids Press meetings and I was showing my work. We've met, we know each other, we continue to work with each
Yeah.
other. And so really that's a reflection, that's an illustration of the best part of something like Bad Kids Press is the
Definitely.
sense of community you get. You
And now
get a
you're
sense,
here
right.
telling everyone else about Bad Kids Press. So,
It's full circle.
yeah.
Yeah. So Bad Kids Press grew out of our local comic book store, the Eisner Award-winning store, Kamikaze. It decided to set up a publishing imprint. The publishing imprint of the comic book store was called Bad Kids Press. They've put out a bunch of books. I'm going to turn around and show
Sure.
you.
And also, just so, if people watching this are interested,
Yeah.
it's free to attend a Bad
Yeah.
Kids Press meeting, right? I mean, there's no
So because of the
upfront cost
pandemic,
or-
there are no meetings going on
Right.
currently. Let's put it, a more accurate statement would be, before the pandemic, it was free and open invitation, and we used to hold what was called we would have like public open signings, open studios. That's what they're called.
Yes.
So we used to hold open studios where people could just show up, and then we'd have open meetings, which was more administrative. So the open studios were a creative experience where people were writing and drawing, and anyone could come. They could talk with the creators. They could join the creators. So open studios were one aspect of it, and then we'd have open meetings, which were a more business side, administrative side, where people would be pitching ideas or talking about what was coming up. So this is an example of
I still remember when we all went out for drinks after one of those administrative meetings.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, like, again, great sense of community, great sense of collaboration. You work with other people. Some of the stuff Bad Kids Press has turned out. So this is an anthology where this is called Fractured Continuum.
Okay.
And it's a Bad Kids Press anthology. And it's basically a collection of stories that travel through the spectrum of comic book history, starting with the Golden Age and all the way to modern comics, and there are representations of each version of it. And so all the collaborators did a version of their stories.
Which age did you do?
So I did pulp. I did the Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, pulp comics, 1930s, 1940s retro science fiction. So here are examples of it. I'll pull it up. So you can see a guy wearing a helmet, wearing a gun, with
very Buck Rogers.
Very Buck Rogers, very Flash Gordon. His name is Jack Lightning.
Perfect.
So Jack Lightning Galactic Trooper is very Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon. And yes, and so Fractured Continuum, Bad Kids Press Anthology. Again, circle back to answer your question. Bad Kids Press, where we met, it's a publishing imprint. It's a local publishing imprint of the comic book creators in the Boston/Somerville area. I'm big fans of them. It was very much a struggle for me making comic books on my own. It was not socially rewarding. And now that I work with others, it's just been very helpful. And everyone gets to contribute their strengths, which is great, the great part of a collective. And that some people in our group are really good creators, but terrible promoters.
Sure.
Their work, they don't want to go out there to conventions. They don't want to tell people, hey, take a look at this.
Or they might not even know how to promote. I mean,
they might not know. That's correct. and I didn't know exactly. And then I would watch other people who were good at self-promotion, very comfortable with it, and understood that's part of the process. And, it relaxed me. And I said, there are people out there who would like to see your book. And so you have to give them the opportunity to do it,
Right.
and so that's good. So there's some writers who are not great artists. There's some artists who are not great writers. That's a very natural marriage combination.
Yeah, I
That you want
suck
to
when
bring
it
those
comes to
people
art
together.
personally.
Yeah, there are a lot of folks, and that's true. That's been true historically about comic books. Is that there are creative teams, not only because different people have different strengths, but also it's in a lot of ways more time efficient to have the factory model where everyone takes a little part. I
Definitely.
like when I can hand off any part of the comic book making process to someone else capable, competent, and enthusiastic, because that's one less thing I have to do. So I enjoy doing that as well. And then again, there are a lot of people who might know about the creative aspect, but not know about the business part of it. And that's one of those things that by working with Bad Kids Press, I was able to communicate with folks who are like, here's how we should move forward on the business administrative level, get books distribution, which is a thing I never would have known about, never would have taken steps on. But fortunately, there are people there who do know about it, who do have direct contacts with the Diamond catalog, who interact with their liaisons, who know what the process and the procedure is, so you can get your foot in the door. And I think
Right.
that's beneficial.
Yeah, no, I definitely, because they kind of go hand in hand, right? Like if you're incredibly creative and you can make a comic, but you don't know
Yeah,
the business aspect, you don't know how to promote it, you don't
yeah,
know how to let people know it even exists, then
right,
you have
right.
something for you, which is great, but
Yeah, yeah,
or if you know the more business aspect, but you're not
right.
at all,
Yeah,
the two sides need each other, basically.
I agree. I think that's correct. What's
I mean, a
difficult is,
lot of people like to put the business aspects down, but truth be told, in my humble opinion, like you wouldn't. It's a symbiotic relationship.
definitely,
uh,
definitely. But here's the thing. A lot of people like to put it down because it's not the part that's fun to think about.
right,
No one wants to think about the business aspects. Having said that, it's critical and it's necessary. And so, if it all depends on what your participatory aspect of the process is. If you're just a consumer, you don't really need to know about the business aspects,
right,
but you need them in order to get the product.
right,
You don't want
right,
to think about it, and it's easy to put down because it doesn't provide you with the entertainment and the fun. However, without it, you would never read the creative parts of it.
right. Your Batman's, your Spider-Man's, your Bad Kids
Yeah,
Press books wouldn't
right.
be there.
Look,
So,
it's one of those things that you don't have to think about if you're a consumer. You
right,
don't need to know the ins and the outs and how the sausage is made. It's not critical to you. However, if you're someone who's a creator and would like people to read the books, it's helpful to think about. It's helpful,
sure,
and it's helpful to be able to lean on people. Bob Howard, who is one of the co-owners of Kamikaze and one of the founders of Bad Kids Press, has experience on the retail side, which was really beneficial. And I felt very fortunate that I could work with him and he could give me his insights on how we could get Diamond catalog distribution, how books could get distributed, and how retailers could get it, and how it would get to these vendors. And those are aspects that I have no firsthand experience with. I have a lot of firsthand experience writing scripts and drawing pictures.
yeah,
That only gets so far, but that's always the benefit of a collective, an ensemble of collaboration, is that everyone can bring their strengths. And if you're open minded and humble and willing to learn from other people who know more than you do, then it works out great. You sit there and you go, oh, I didn't know any of these things. And I defer to your greater wisdom and greater experience in this matter. And so let's all work together towards a common goal. And that's why, there are 4 titles coming out from Bad Kids Press. It's not just
which
me with
is
my vanity
amazing.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a bunch
I
of
mean,
different.
that's just such fantastic news. I didn't even know this before doing this
Yeah, well,
interview. So,
I would say that no one really wanted to talk about it during the until it was close
sure. Sure.
You're not interested in talking about a thing that's not going to happen. But yeah, it's great that all these different writers and all these different artists and all these different administrators, and we're all working together. And Bob also is not just on the business side. We're working on a comic book together. He's a writer,
Hmm.
and he puts stories together, and he's writing something. I'm doing the artwork for it. So like it's a collaborative spirit that infiltrates every aspect and every level of Bad Kids Press. So yeah, it's a great imprint, and it's sort of my second home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
I can tell it comes through,
Yeah,
which is fantastic. So let me ask you then.
yeah,
Obviously, a part of getting distributed is, again, more eyes on your
right.
personal work.
Yeah.
Uh, the classic job application question, right?
Hmm.
10 to 20 years, where would you like to be? Would you like to be
So
working for like Marvel or DC, or would you like to still be an independent? Or
here, I'll work backwards. It's a good question. What
okay,
would be 10, 20 years from? Because I'm 48, we missed it. 2020 was going to be my 25th college reunion.
mm,
So, our class, my class and my wife's class, because we were in college together, we graduated in 95. So 2020 was going to be the 25th college reunion. And one of the questions they asked for our collection, our book that collected what everyone's updates were,
sure,
the that
the
came out with
class,
25th
yeah,
reunion. The class register was, uh, what are you up to? And one of the things I wrote was that, when I was a kid, when I was a freshman, when I started at college, the things I wanted to do were, to find someone and marry someone cool and make music and play in a band and play shows and record music and
and
make
you're kind
comics,
of succeeding
write
at all of
comics.
those. So
Yeah, so it was like, just in hindsight, at the age of 48, I feel very fortunate and very thankful in that I've been able to do the things I've wanted to do. And that was just sort of over time, one step would lead to another and gave opportunities, and just opportunities meant that you could do some things that you were interested in. And so yeah, my wife and I met when we were teenagers as freshmen, and we're married now. It's 25 years later.
wow,
We met in 1992, and we're still together in 2021. So that's great.
that's
And
amazing.
yeah, we're very happy.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I play in a couple of bands. We don't do live gigs anymore because of the global pandemic, but I've joined bands and we play shows and we record music, and that it's still sort of surreal to me that I get paid to play live music and get
What
paid
are
to.
the so people know when the pandemic ends, hopefully at some point.
Yeah.
What are the name of your bands?
So I have a couple of bands. The live band that I play with is called the Detonators, and that's a band in the Boston area with a bunch of experienced blues veterans from the Boston
Nice.
area who are older than I am, and I get they recruited me to play bass with them, and I'm very happy to be a part of that band. Members of that band, for example, you know. Used to tour with Coco Taylor, who's a legendary blues vocalist, and so he's a drummer and vocalist in our band, and I play bass for him. And I feel good participating in a group with guys that talented. And so the Detonators is my live band, and we play a lot of vintage rockabilly, retro rock, blues. And then I have a band that's a studio recording project. It's called the Overnight Millionaires, and I play,
Okay, I like the name.
and yeah, and we play sort of indie garage punk rock, and that's sort of it allows me to do stuff where I'm playing live and when I'm recording, and it allows me to play covers and older rock, and then also write original indie garage punk music. So those are the name of my bands: the Detonators and the Overnight Millionaires. And so that's the musical aspect of my life, which I've always valued a lot. And then another thing I get to do now is I'm writing, I'm drawing, I'm publishing comics, and they're getting people's hands. So looking back, if I looked as a freshman at 18 years old in 1991 and saw my life now, I'd be like, that worked out really well. You
Yeah.
know, you're very fortunate to be able to do the things you love and be with the people that you love. And so what happens 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't have a lot of expectations. I've already
Okay.
accomplished. I've over accomplished, and I've already done the things I want to do at a level that I didn't necessarily think I was going to be able to do them.
Which is, I mean, amazing. But very few people are fortunate enough to be able to say that, especially in their
Yeah.
40s. So that's
Right.
great.
Very few people are fortunate enough to be able to do that. Look, none of it has made me rich nor famous nor all that successful, but from a creative and personal standpoint, it's been very gratifying. Now, if I work for Marvel or DC or I don't know, like that's so theoretical to me.
Okay. Well, let me change the question then.
Yeah.
Is there any pre-existing character that you
Yeah.
would like to either write for or draw or both? Like, is there a character where
Yeah.
you'd like,
A lot of them.
I'd love to someday do that?
So I think that there are a lot of pre-existing characters that I would be better writing than drawing. And like I've always loved. So here's part of the problem.
Okay, tell me.
I have a hard time keeping track of modern DC continuity.
I feel like doesn't everyone these days?
Oh, right. Okay.
I mean,
So I was about to answer your question. I would like to write this character, but then I said I don't actually know the world they exist in anymore. Like I don't know what continuity, what is a canon, what their current state is, what their historical.
let's say that doesn't matter, because if you've been reading comics long enough, the one thing you know is everything eventually reverts.
So yeah, simple. Like my favorite DC character is the Flash. My favorite DC property is the Justice League.
Okay.
My favorite Marvel character is Captain America, and
Nice.
I love all of them. That doesn't necessarily mean I feel qualified or think that I should be writing any of them. But if someone gave me an opportunity, that'd be great. And I think ideally, my preference is to work on independent creator-owned projects.
Okay.
And I think that that gives you an opportunity. It's not as glamorous as working on one of the established mainstream high-profile properties.
Sure.
However, there are a lot of people who work on those properties and gravitate towards making
Yes,
their own
who are now doing independent work. So
creator-owned. And creator-owned, one, gives you a lot more freedom, but two, also, so everyone who works for Marvel and DC and works on those big properties, it's all work for hire.
Right. And most of them have, especially these days, most of them have their own independent titles that are theirs that they write on the side, as well as
Yeah. And so a lot of people who work for big corporations on those established titles, it's because they've always wanted to, and so they get to fulfill, there's wish fulfillment. But
but that's not a wish that you have, per se.
Well, it would be fun, but it's not necessarily my ideal goal, if only because I think all of us were all very familiar with the stories of people who were taken advantage of or exploited working for the big corporations who put their work in. And whether you start at the very beginning at Siegel and Schuster, who created Superman, and then it was taken away from them and they didn't profit from it. Jack Kirby, who created all those properties and didn't necessarily profit from them. If you look at Alan Moore and the discussions he's had about Watchmen, where he had ending agreement with DC Comics, and it was supposed to revert to him when it went out of print, which it never did, which was a loophole they exploited. And so Alan Moore had said, I will never work for DC Comics again, and he hasn't. There are lots of examples of very talented creators who did excellent work, but they didn't necessarily benefit from the work because they worked for hire and they got that paycheck and that was the agreement. But for guys like Siegel and Schuster, they signed that. They didn't necessarily. There's an exploitative aspect of.
And also, that was a different age. I don't know that independent comic book publishing.
Yeah, that's right.
was a thing at that point in time,
It wasn't.
unfortunately. So,
It wasn't. And so that was the situation things were in. Things change, things adapt. I mean, the entire reason Image Comics was launched was that all the top creators at Marvel said we'd rather work for ourselves,
right.
rather do our own projects, rather have the creative freedom to do whatever we want to do and reap the benefits, the profits of our own work. Um, it's fine. I am happy to work in an established corporate model. I know what it's like to be part of a team. I know what it's like to work for a paycheck. I know what it's like to work at the service of the property, and that's fine. I understand those things. Having said that, I don't necessarily know if that's better in creating my own cool thing and turning it into something and making it successful. Uh,
Definitely.
I've never had any experience writing established or drawing established properties. I have a lot of experience making my own stuff, creating my own stuff, writing and drawing my own stuff. And that's what my experience is. It's hard for me to project into Marvel and DC. Part of the problem with Marvel and DC is that that's where everyone wants to go. So,
Right.
And there are editors who decide whether you're the person who gets to take over. That's
So it sounds more like you like the ownership, the creative freedom. This is really all the things that you're interested in when it comes to creating comics.
So, what I'm interested in is being able to make stuff. And if there is a gatekeeper who tells me whether I'm allowed to make stuff or not, that inhibits my ability to make things.
Sure.
Before I started making comics, I was an aspiring novelist. And I wrote a novel in my early 20s, and I had a literary agent who had bestsellers on the New York Times bestseller list. She was a good agent. And so I wrote a 330-page novel. I spent 5 years of my life on it, and then she said, "We can't get this published. I can't sell this book," which meant that I'd put all this time and energy into a book that just wasn't going to be put out in the world. It wasn't going to be published, printed.
Right.
There are gatekeepers in different industries, and if I wanted to write Batman, I can't just write a Batman story and draw a Batman story and put it out there. It's like there are trademarks and copyrights and infringement laws. There are editors and
Sure.
and there are corporations. So is the creative freedom good? I mean, sure, that's fine. What is difficult about the corporate model is that they have to want you, and I don't necessarily know how. I'm not sure it's a meritocracy. I don't know what the process is. Like, so many people submit their work. It's especially harder if you really like to write. I mean, for a writer to get one of those gigs, I honestly don't even really know where I would start. If I showed them my samples, they'd go, "That's great. We see thousands of other samples that are comparable to yours," and I don't want to spend my time, waiting, an audition line. Like,
Right.
Here I am. I'm trying out. Here's my audition. Here's my samples. Would you pick me? Like, it's just hard because you never necessarily know what they're looking for, and you never necessarily know whether you'll be able to provide it. And if you can't do those things, you don't get to make the comics, which would make me sad. And so my process is that I just make things to the best of my ability. I write it to the best of my ability. I draw it to the best of my ability.
Well, and your ability, in my humble opinion, is amazing. By the way,
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I know I have limitations, and I don't think I'm the best writer in the world. I don't think I'm the best artist in the world, but I will make things, and they will be finished and completed. And when that happens, if it's creator owned and it's indie publishing, then you don't have any barriers inhibiting, restricting, preventing you from releasing your stuff that you worked on. And that's really why I like the indie model, is that you get to do it. What's fun for me about making comics is making comics, and I don't get rich from any of them, famous from any of them. It's a lot of time and effort, but it makes me happy. I like making stories. I like making comic books, and with Bad Kids Press, they encourage me and support me and tell me, we'll put your stuff out under our banner. Like, it works for me.
Fantastic. And you said that you have something at 5:15, so I don't want to keep you short a little
Yeah,
bit
that's
behind the
so.
curtain.
I
But
actually had a Bad Kids Press meeting, but
oh,
that's not happening. I'm happy to let you go if you want to move on as well, but I have moved off my appointments from, so I don't have anything
well,
following
that
this.
sounds. All of that you just said sounds like such a perfect thing to end on.
Perfect.
Uh, where can people follow you?
Sure. So we are relaunching the website badkidspress.com. Right now we have a dummy template placeholder website, and the new
Okay.
website is going to get updated with all the news. So badkidspress.com, that's a good place to go. My Facebook is Roel Torres, and that's another good place to go. Facebook.
And you're always posting new artwork and
Yeah,
sketches and stuff on your
absolutely.
Facebook. So,
Absolutely. I put a lot of art and sketches on my Facebook page just so people can check it out. There's no point in me drawing this and people not being able to see it. And then I have a blog that's never updated, but
okay.
it's got a lot of my old work up there. It's called
Hmm.
hypersmash.blogspot.com. So like if you ever Google Roel Torres and comics, it'll take you probably to
You'll
those
find
places,
stuff.
my Facebook or my blog or Bad Kids Press. And, I'm around. If anyone ever wants to write to me, Roel Torres at post.harvard.edu.
Now
always
you're
happy.
going to be swarmed with emails.
So, yeah, I always happy to hear from anyone, always happy to help anyone. At Open Studios at Bad Kids Press, one of the great things was meeting people and showing them how the work was done. As I showed, I have a lot of back matter and process work in my graphic novel. If people ever have any questions or want to know or have uh, trying to figure out, how to write stuff or draw stuff, ink stuff, letter stuff, make comics, make graphic novels, just questions, I'm always happy to chat with anyone about it.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on
Thanks,
and
Evan.
letting me interview you. This has been
My
absolutely
pleasure.
great. And
All right, man. It
all
was good to
right,
see you.
good to see
Take
you
care.
too. I
You all
will
stay
stay
safe.
in touch.
All right.
Might have some more work coming your way soon. So
I'm
speaking
always
of,
happy to do it, buddy.
all
All right. Happy New
right,
Year, Evan.
happy
Take
New
care.
Year. Bye.